Thank you. I saw your email.
Great.
Do you think your crew will join us tonight, Max?
Well, I told them in the Discord.
Oh, okay,
And
good,
also
good.
host the channel, so
I,
maybe, I don't know.
do you have our channel?
Sorry, you mean like a Twitch channel or?
Yeah.
Yeah, from the
Oh.
Twitch streamers.
Okay, good. Ah, nice. Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome International Master Max.
Hello.
Whilst we wait for everyone to get in, I'm
Okay.
going to let the admin and bots in and everyone in to ask questions so that they get familiar with you before we start.
Yeah.
And I'll be getting our stuff also ready in the background. Welcome
Okay.
Yubo, welcome Greywood, everyone in the chat. Unusual Scorpion. Some Twitch names are funny. Anyway, welcome Max. I really appreciate your willingness to do this with us. I think you're our first international player to come on board and be
Okay.
interested in helping. Just a little bit of background. I think I only first saw you at the Tata Steel.
Yeah, that's probably where people might know me a bit about or from the Tata Steel tournament this year. But yeah, I'm a Dutch international master, and I'm 20 years old.
Ah,
And, yeah, I like playing chess, obviously. Also,
yeah.
just lectures or coaching. So
I guess
That's
my first question, Max, is something which we would ask from our point of view. Is your country supportive of your talent?
is my country.
Supportive? Does it support you in your campaigns and everything you do with regards to chess, or it's like self-driven?
Well, they support me a little bit. Not too much, but also not too little, I would say. So they help me out from time to time. They sometimes sponsor training sessions for me
Wow.
with some strong players, and yeah, they allow me to or in the past, I've played European Youth Championships and World Youth Championships, and they supported me in that as well. Paid for some of the costs. So, yeah, the federation does support me as a player.
Good. That is nice to hear. I don't know anyone in the chat. If anyone has got a question for International Master Max, this is the time to ask before we start, of course, with our workshop. Just check if you can see the chat, Max, just in case someone. So Yubo just asked, why do you play the King's Indian, Max?
Well, funny story actually. When I was about 13, 14 years old, I didn't really have a black repertoire against 1d4 or 1c4. And I was always playing like some kind of semi-Slav setup, but I just didn't know at all what I was doing. And then I told my coach that I wanted to learn to play the King's Indian. Even though I didn't know what it was, I heard about the name and I thought it was a cool opening, even though I didn't exactly know what it was. And then my coach started teaching me the King's Indian, and it turned out to be a great opening. And that's kind of how I rolled into it. And yeah, I'm still playing the King's Indian. So it's nice that that happened. Gave me tons of victories.
Oh yeah, okay, good. The next one was, what is your favorite King's Indian game?
Well, one of my favorite King's Indian games. Well, there were many actually. There are a lot of beautiful King's Indian games, but one of them is one I'm going to show tonight.
Nice.
One by Gary Kasparov. So probably Gary Kasparov is the most famous King's Indian player. Also maybe the greatest player of all time, but he's also a very well-known King's Indian player. So he has many great games, and I picked one of those.
Oh, good. The next one was... Oh, when did you start playing chess?
Yeah.
When did you start playing chess?
When I started playing chess, so the game was taught to me by my father when I was 5 years old, but I only started taking it very seriously when I was around 12 years old. Then that was the moment when I started training with a coach, and I went to more tournaments as well.
I've sent you an invite on Lichess for the study.
Chess for 15 years, but
I've sent you the invite on Lichess.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay, good. So you said your dad taught you how to play?
Yeah, he knows the basic rules and that's it, and he learned me the game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it went from there basically. There was also in the Netherlands at schools very often chess is being taught, and I was lucky to be on one of those schools, and that really advanced me further. Otherwise, I would have just played it maybe from time to time as a game, but not at all serious, going to tournaments or anything. But really, I was really lucky to be on a school where chess was also being taught.
And someone says, what do you do to improve and get stronger? I guess that applies to present time. What do you do in present time to improve and get stronger?
I mainly work on my openings. So one thing that, well, basically it's openings, but at my level we analyze the openings so far that it's basically the middle game already. And that helps me train the middle game as well. But also I do tactics, which I think is really important. Sometimes I read some books, but not too many. And what I also do is analyze my own games. Whenever I play a serious over the board game, I always analyze them deeply. Because I think that's a great way to improve your chess.
Okay. Reflector 1973 says, who is your favorite Dutch player?
I haven't really ever thought about that. I could name my favorite of all the world, but not. Let me think about it.
Is it because
Because
they
right
are?
now we have any
Is it
theory
because
of
they are
this user.
competition, or it's just something you've never thought of?
Yeah, not really something I've ever thought of. I guess. Very difficult. One of my good friends, Jordan van Vrees, is also a very strong Dutch player. I'll probably go for him
Oh, okay.
because he's really, really talented. He has like 2,700 these days, and
I think you spoke fast there. That's Jordan van Forest to us. The way you spoke was obviously the Dutch accent.
yeah, yeah, it's a Dutch name, so of course I'm gonna have a Dutch accent. When I
You
say it, yeah.
you know that Afrikaans, the main language here in South Africa, is a derivative language of the Dutch language.
Yeah, yeah, I know, yeah.
Oh wow! Okay.
So I do know some South African words, but because they are from the Netherlands originally, but I probably couldn't understand you if you would speak it.
Okay, I think that person who asked that question of your favorite Dutch player is one of our top historians in the country. That's
Yeah.
a chess kind of archiver and keeper of knowledge, Advocate Lyndon Bauer. Is very knowledgeable around the world regarding chess and the history of where certain things come from. So he obviously asked that question. He's the same one who asked the question of who is your favorite King's Indian player. I can definitely say he's one of the best practitioners in the country of the King's Indian defense.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And I think since I've known him, he's always played the King's Indian. Okay, good.
Okay. Okay.
It seems like we don't have more questions, but I guess I wanted to ask you, what are your ambitions?
Yeah. So I've got a couple. My first ambition is to get the Grandmaster title. Um,
Mm.
so I'm quite close already,
Uh-huh.
and that's always been my ambition. But these days, it's not anymore my highest ambition.
Yeah.
I want more. Um, I'm thinking of maybe 2,600 at some point. FIDE 2,600,
Uh-huh.
which would be great. And another ambition is becoming Dutch champion.
Yeah,
Because
that's attainable, right?
yeah, yeah. So I'm not gonna say world champion because I don't think that's attainable. But I think Dutch champion or 2,600 could definitely be achieved if I work hard.
Ah, but why do you cancel off the world champion one?
I don't know.
Carlsen is making it difficult for everyone.
I mean, the world champions are just incredibly strong, and they were grandmasters at the age of 13, 14 maybe.
Uh,
So I'm already a bit behind them then.
okay. When did you become grandmaster? Sorry, when did you become? Oh, you are not yet grandmaster. I guess I see what you mean.
Yeah,
Okay, so one last question. This is from Yubo, and he says, "How much time do you spend on chess per week?"
yeah, it really depends. I think these days probably around 20 hours a week on trading. I also do chess streaming aside from that, but I wouldn't consider that as really like trading. It's just playing some blitz games mostly. So I
Uh-huh.
would say probably train 20 hours a week.
20 hours a week. And how do you divide it per day?
Yeah, it depends. Sometimes it could be like a full day and I make 10 hours.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I maybe only 1 hour a day. It really depends on the day and what I have to do besides that.
Yeah.
Not really a schedule which I have.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, good. So I guess we can get started. Let me just share the board so everyone is on the same page. Mm. Okay, so there we go. I think you know your way, how to navigate your way in the studies, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, you can fire away.
Okay. So one thing I have to say about the King's Indian is that it basically can be played against anything except for one e4. So you have one e4, and against that you can play Sicilian or whatever. But you can play the King's Indian against one c4 or one knight f3 or one d4. And that's one of the greatest things about the opening is that it's very universal. You basically just go knight f6, g6, bishop g7, castle, you go d6, and you're set up. And you can do this against one c4, one knight f3, or one d4, it doesn't really matter. So the first couple of moves are very easy, and then you see what white has done meanwhile. And the classical setup for white is just grabbing the space. Black is not doing anything in the center, so this gives white time to grab some space in the center. And what you very often see is white getting 3 pawns in the center like this, c4, d4, e4. White could even potentially go for this setup with
so we are not getting the board. We're not getting your moves. Is your sink connect green? Sink underneath the...
No, I think it's set up, yeah.
Okay, good. Yes, now we are getting it. Thank you.
Okay. So, yeah, as I said, basically you just play this setup with knight f6, g6, bishop g7, and you just see what white does against it. Usually, the typical King's Indian position is actually this position. And here white has a lot of different ideas. One is f3, another is just simply knight f3. Another could be bishop e2, bishop e3. Later on we will see a game where I was playing white against the King's Indian and I choose a setup with h3 followed by bishop e3. So a lot of different setups. And yeah, black just always chooses the same setup basically with black. And this was a game between Jeroen Piquet and Garry Kasparov, and in those days they mainly played the setup with knight f3 followed by bishop e2, which is basically the classical way of playing. And I'm not sure if this is really still the main line. It's still the most played line, but I'm not sure if it's anymore the most critical. These days people have started to play other variations against the King's Indian as well. But they used to play this mainly. And what you will see in the King's Indian is that you can very often play, or basically very often play e5. Trying to eventually get a pawn in the center. At some point you need to grab space, so you need something in the center. Another idea though is going c5. So depending on what white's setup is, you can either go c5 or e5. So that means that your setup with black is always very flexible. And if you play c5, you'll very often get like a Benoni type position like this. And if you play e5, what happened in the game, which is the more typical way of playing in the King's Indian, you'll probably get a closed position like this. You get basically, sorry for the errors, but you'll get this type of structure. e4 d5 against e5 d6. And now what are the plans for each side basically? So what you will very often see is that you need to have a look at your structure to know where you need to play. So if you have a look at black structure, it's pointing this way. White structure is pointing this way, upwards. So that means that black's play is on the king side and white's play will be on the queen side, because black has the most space on the king side and white has the most space on the queen side. So it makes sense for black to eventually go for the f5 break, while white wants to go for the c5 break. So that's the most basic plan in these positions for both sides. But they are not easy to achieve because right now pawns being blocked by the knight. And c5 is not so easy because black can still take it. So you'll see from both sides that they will start preparing their pawn break, and yeah, go for those plans. So white in this game plays knight e1. White would like to get the bishop to this diagonal, where it's the longest diagonal basically on the board where it can be. The problem is that with the immediate bishop e3, it can be harassed with the knight. And if the bishop moves again, then black basically gets a free tempo, so he can move the pawn immediately. So white first moves the knight away. After knight e7, white does play bishop e3, and now it cannot be harassed anymore. And the bishop on e3 is targeting a7, but also it helps protect the king. And eventually white wants to go for the c5 break, so it makes a lot of sense to put bishop on e3. So black goes f5. He has planned what he wants to do. White wants to keep the bishop on this diagonal, so he goes f3. And after that, if black ever plays f4, white can draw back the bishop to f2, so that it will still be on this diagonal. And now, what does black want? So what you want with black is you want to go for the play on the king side, and basically the typical plan is to go for the king side attack with the move f4, closing down the position, and eventually you want to go for g5 and h5 and storm with the pawns on the king side. And yeah, white's plan is still to go for the c5 break. So black in this position goes f4. This all still very well known from the King's Indian, at least. If you're not very familiar with the King's Indian, this is the main line basically, which will happen very often. I've had this position myself as well a couple of times with a good score, luckily enough. But it's very unbalanced. Basically, black is going for a very strong kingside attack, but if white does not get mated, then eventually white has his own play on the queen side as well. So you will not see a lot of draws in the King's Indian because either white gets mated or white probably gets a queen. Or
someone is going to lose.
So yeah, how does black continue to attack? Well, he needs to open up something on the king side. And the easiest pawn break on the king side would be to go g4, obviously. So black goes g5. However, it's not so easy to go for the g4 break because, as you can see, there are a lot of pieces targeting the g4 square. So it needs take some work before you can get in g4. And meanwhile, white will play a couple of useful moves. Rook c1, knight e3 to go c5. And after which knight b5, cd6. So white's play is also coming, and you need to be fast with black before you start losing material on the queen side. So what happened was white plays b4, trying to get in c5, because the pawn was still, this knight was still in d7. If c5, you can simply take it. So b4 first to prepare c5. And now that c5 can't really be prevented, black gets the knight back to the king side, trying to prepare g4. And one idea you'll very often see in the King's Indian is that you don't put the pawn on h5. It seems very illogical why you shouldn't be putting the pawn on h5. But the thing is that eventually white puts the knight on b5 very likely. And this drops the defense of the e4 pawn. So the one thing that I was doing on c3 was defending the e4 pawn. And once black goes g4 and white takes it with the f pawn, this leaves the defense of the e4 pawn. So here the pawn was also defending the e4 pawn. So let's say the knight moves and you go g4. If white takes, you can take on e4. So basically you play as many useful moves until white moves the knight, and then you go g4. So what you will see is kind of a waiting phase by black, trying to slowly improve his position here. And eventually he will go for the g4 break. But he will not do it immediately because h5 is kind of a loss of a tempo.
That's an interesting point. Thank you. Like, I think really that's something I actually personally didn't know, that you don't push h5. And what you're waiting for on your g4 sequence is for the knight to be away so that e4 is weak. And locally, I play the white side a lot of the King's Indian. I've seen a lot of people push h5, and
Yeah.
I don't think this concept is a common knowledge concept.
Yeah, so h5 is logical, but there are a lot of more useful moves than h5 first that can be played. And Kasparov follows his plan really well. So right now, Black doesn't have a lot of pieces on the king side, right? So okay, he does have these pieces already here, and the bishop is also there, but this knight is far away from the king. Same for the rook, same for the bishop, same for the queen. So they are still, even though they are already on the king side, they can still be improved. And that is what Kasparov does. His opponent Piquet already went for the c5 break, and Kasparov improved the knight to g6. So not only does the g5 move prepare g4, but it also creates this square. And meanwhile, White continues his plan. He takes on d6, takes back. Eventually, White will take on d6 anyway, because if he plays c6, Black can always go b6. And it's very hard to open up the queen side this way. If White plays a4, Black can maybe play a6. And whatever White pushes, Black can still close it.
Yeah.
a5, b5, and then b5, a5.
And it's
So
quite funny
eventually-
that actually someone has tried it and lost with White. Just as you were
Someone?
moving, the database showed someone has actually tried it and it didn't work.
Yeah. Yes, d6 is not the way to go. I'm not sure if you should already take on d6, but eventually White will take on d6 anyway.
Okay.
So White already took. Black takes back with the pawn, keeping the pawn structure healthy. White moves the rook to the open file, which is very logical. And now a very strange looking move happened. Well, it's a strange looking move if you don't know the King's Indian yet. But it's actually very common in the King's Indian. So Black is not ready yet to play g4 because White can still take it. So he needs to play another move, preparing or basically improving his position. The knight's already great on g6, the knight's already great on f6. Bishop to h6 doesn't do much, so if we have a look at which move still improves the position, it's rook f7. And it looks very strange at first, but as you can see with the arrows, the rook does a lot on the 7 rank. So this is a very typical move, rook f7, because the 7 rank is so open that it protects a lot of squares. So one idea by White was to go knight b5 and enter the position with knight c7 or rook c7. But because the rook on f7 protects the square, it's not so easy to achieve. And another idea is that Black eventually wants to get in the rook to g7 or h7. So the rook has a lot of potential on f7, and that's why Kasparov plays this move. And it's a very typical idea in the King's Indian. White plays a4, grabbing more space on the queen side. After which Black plays another preparing move. He still can go for the g4 move, and there are more logical or more useful moves than h5 left in the position. So Black can still play another move before he goes h5. And Kasparov went for the move bishop f8, and looks very strange at first because it looks very passive. And why would Black ever play this? Well, you want the bishop in general is not so great. There are many pawns on dark squares, which means that basically the bishop is only looking towards his own pawns, and that means that it will not be very effective and do much. So he moves it out of the way so that the rook can eventually go to g7 or h7 and attack the king on these two files. Also, the bishop on f8 is protecting d6, the weakest pawn in the black position, because the other pawns are being protected by each other or can really be attacked very easily. So the bishop is protecting d6, and especially as White wants to go knight b5, this could very easily become a target. So the bishop on f8 is really the best square for the bishop right now. And now White played a5, basically grabbing more space. And what we have kind of seen in the past few moves is kind of a waiting game. Because white doesn't really want to move out the knight because that allows g4. Because the knight doesn't defend e4 anymore. While black is also playing some moves, hoping for white to eventually move the knight away. So both players are moving or playing the most useful moves in the position, while kind of waiting for the other to play a move. So black hopes for knight b5, while white hopes for h5. So black plays another useful move, developing the bishop to d7. And now eventually white doesn't have that many useful moves left, so he finally moves the knight away. Knight to b5, creating some threats. Now that the rook is being blocked by the bishop, the knight could potentially go to c7, maybe go to e6 to create some mayhem in the black position. And also the knight is targeting the a7 pawn. So already some threats for white, while black doesn't have any threats himself yet. But of course, now that the knight is finally moved, this is the time to go g4. Going for the pawn break event, finally. And the idea, of course, as I said, once the knight moves, you can't go g4 because after fg4, you can take the pawn e4. And the bishop actually doesn't really have any squares. So this will mean that you'll also be able to take the dark square bishop. And if we have a look at, for example, this position, which pieces are the best in each position, I've already said that this bishop pawn f8 is not that great because the pawns are in dark squares. White is kind of the same, but kind of reversed. White has a lot of pawns on light squares, especially in the center. So that means that this bishop on e2 is quite bad. But on the other hand, the bishop on f2 is quite good because it can move along the pawns and not look at his own pawns. And the same goes for black. This is a great bishop, and this is a bad bishop. And for white, the bishop on e2 is quite bad, and the bishop on f2 is quite good. So black really wants to get the f2 bishop, and white does not want to lose it. So he cannot take on g4. One trick also that black has is in this position you cannot go bishop a7. It seems to save the bishop for now, and but the problem is that you can go bishop takes b5, removing the defender of the a7 bishop, so that after bishop takes b5 you can take on a7 and you're up a piece. So the bishop cannot be saved at this point after knight takes c4. So black finally managed to get in g4. White goes knight c7. And now a very typical idea of the King's Indian. Black basically in the King's Indian always goes for a full out attack, and he just doesn't care about material. He wants to make the king at whatever cost. And what you will very often see in the King's Indian is that you sacrifice the rook for 2 or 3 tempi. And meanwhile you hope to get a devastating attack on the king side. So in this game as well, Kasparov just doesn't care about the a8 rook, and he goes g3 instead, going for the pawn break on the king side. Okay, white takes the bait and takes on a8, and black's already down a full rook, but you can see that with all these pawns here. And the knights are ready to jump in, the bishop ready to jump in, the queen is about to come, the rook is ready to go to the g file. There are a lot of attackers, so this is very scary for white. What happened in the game was, okay, black can even take the bishop and take on a8, after which he has 2 pieces for the pawn and the rook, and he would be much better actually, because 2 pieces are worth more than 1 rook in this type of position. Kasparov didn't even go for this. He sacrificed the full rook basically. He goes knight h5. He just doesn't care about the knight because it costs a lot of time to take it. He wants the king, the queen on the king side. He wants to keep the g3 pawn alive, so he just doesn't care about the pieces. He just goes for the king. If white gets mated, it doesn't matter how much material you have left on the board. If it's mate, you win. So he's going for the mate. So Here, Piquet went for king h1. Black was already threatening to go queen h4 with a mating threat. So the idea of Piquet was to go king h1, and after queen h4, he would have his kings are kind of protected with bishop g1. And it's not so easy to see how black would continue the attack here, especially after gh2. You can go bishop f2, and it's not so easy to the g4 open or the h file, because the pawn h2 seems like an attacker, but it's actually blocking his own pawns. So this is not really the way to go for black. Instead, he does take the bishop finally. It's the best minor piece on the board, so okay, can understand that he takes it, of course. And meanwhile, if we compare it to a move before, black he could have taken here as well, but instead he has played knight h5, which is a very useful move. And white has played king h1, which is not necessarily a useful move, so he kind of got an improvement over taking on f2 immediately. And white kind of needed to play king h1, because otherwise it's very difficult to do anything about queen h4. So king h1 happened, g takes f2, white took back, of course, and now Kasparov went for a very nice move, knight g3 check, getting in an attacker to the king. And it's kind of obvious that you cannot take on d3, because after taking, black takes back, attacks the rook, and black is going to mate soon. So let's say you play rook f1, you go queen h4 check, king g1, queen h2 check, mate, actually. And this is a very typical mating idea in these type of positions for black. Basically white cannot take on g3, and he went king g1 back. And now finally Kasparov took the knight on a8. So if we compare it again to the previous time he could have taken on f2, so let's say we compare it to this position, he basically has two full extra tempi. We suddenly have the same position with the knight on g3 instead of f6. So this knight h5 is very smart by Kasparov. So we get this position, and here it's just a very difficult position for white. If again he takes on g3, black just takes back, attacks the rook. So if white moves back, then even though it looks very slow, queen d8 is coming, and I don't see what white even wants to do about this queen h4, queen h2.
It's quite funny how the queen goes away and comes back still in time to deliver a checkmate.
Yeah, that's very pretty. Yeah, it's the thing about these positions is that time has a lot of value. Yeah. So what you could see in this position, black didn't take back because he thought the two moves, basically time, was worth a lot less than the knight. So he valued time over material. So that's kind of a interesting idea for sure.
Just to ask you a question, when you think of elements like these, do you quantify them? Do you have a way of quantifying time, space, material, and of course development?
What exactly do you mean with quantify?
Like for instance, he had the choice of taking the knight or going for an attack. There must be some sort of measure in his mind which he used to say, okay, at this point, time is more important than material.
Yeah, very often this depends on the type of position. Like in a closed position, so with the center closed like this, and especially also with the king side closed, time is very well. I would say that time is kind of more important, because in an open position, let's say without these pawns, you cannot give away rook, because then white will have very easy play. It'll start exchanging pieces, and you'll just be down the rook. So it depends on the type of position. It's hard to quantify like time and material. I think for Kasparov, for example, he can maybe even just calculate everything what's happening. Uh, but for mere mortals, it's difficult. In general, in King's Indian, you value time over material, and you give away the A8 rook.
Okay.
You should not always do it, of course, but you can already see how far Black's attack is, and then if you're already so far in the attack, you shouldn't be caring about such a rook, which is actually doing nothing. The thing is here that it's a rook which is normally 5 or worth 5 points, but it's actually not doing anything. So okay, it sounds very stupid, but let's put the pawn b8. It cannot be done, of course, but the rook would be completely trapped. It would be completely worthless. Cannot do anything. So it might be like worth 5 points, but it actually just doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
So here as well, it basically has no value because it just doesn't do anything. So it's not such a big problem to give it away.
Okay.
And that's what Kasparov did. And in the game, eventually he got his material back. And now, okay, as I explained already, you cannot take on g3 because you get mated eventually anyway with the queen coming. So we calculated another move, bishop c4. And now I would say that black or white might actually be threatening to take the knight now, because now white could potentially move the rook away to c2 and then try to escape with the king to e2. So you need to be a bit careful of that. But instead, Kasparov plays a very strange looking move at first, at least. He plays the move a6. And it looks extremely slow. Like, time is very important in the King's Indian. But the thing is that he is still improving his pieces. So he wants to get the queen to a7 to get it on the long diagonal. He could get it to d8, h4, but if white never takes on g3, it's not clear what the queen is doing on h4, because it needs the pawn on g3 to attack h2. So if white doesn't take on g3, it's not apparent what the queen is doing on the king side. So instead, he leaves it on queen side, trying to go queen a7 next, which would be pinning the rook. And now the problem is, if he takes and moves the rook away, the queen is not coming to the king side, but the queen is coming to or staying on the queen side. Queen a7 check. And yeah, it's just very, very difficult position. If king f1, I think black just goes rook f4, wants to get the rook in. And yeah, it seems like white is just getting mated here. Maybe black could even start with knight f4 or rook f4. There are a lot of ideas here. Also, bishop h6, finally getting the bishop into play. And black is only down in exchange, so he hasn't really sacrificed much, and he could very easily get it back on c1, for example. So it's not really like he invested a lot into the attack, so this is very dangerous for white. So white didn't take the knight, and now the problem is after queen e7, you can never take it or even consider it anymore, because now if you take it, the rook will be pinned by the queen, and you'll take on f2 next, after which black will be up a full piece. And if black is up a full piece and also has the attack, you know something has really gone wrong. So you cannot take it anymore. And Piquet instead played d5, trying to close off the queen. So Kasparov doesn't allow this by going a b5, bishop b5, and it seems like white is on play in the queen side now. The rook might be entering soon. But Kasparov played a very, very nice move in this position, after which Piquet immediately resigned.
Let's ask if the chat can guess what that move is.
I think this is a very famous move, and which made the game also kind of famous.
Okay, so anyone in the chat who can see what that move is?
Someone found it in chat. I'm seeing Ubo 0 found it.
You
It's
both.
not Bishop B5. I think Bishop B5 could potentially be also good. But there's an even stronger move. Knight H1. And Piquet immediately resigned after this move was played.
Okay.
Just looks so beautiful to get the the knight on H1 is just so beautiful. How did it ever get there, basically? And yeah, the problem is for white, if he takes the knight, you could take the rook, and black is up a full piece with a completely lost position for white. And if you do not take it, you cannot defend the f2 rook, or you can defend, but after knight takes f2, you will also be down a piece, at least. So in his position after this very beautiful move, he get resigned, and Gary Kasparov won one of his King's Indian games. He has a lot of victories in the King's Indian, and if you are interested in playing the King's Indian, I would definitely recommend having a look at them. They also made me a better King's Indian player, so definitely have a look at them. And I think we're gonna move on to the next game.
Okay.
Which was a game by me actually. And at the start of the lecture, I said that the King's Indian is a very universal move, which can be played against d4, c4, or knight f3. But I actually kind of got a King's Indian from 1e4. So even from 1e4, you can get King's Indian type positions. Sometimes you'll see them from some modern type of openings. So sometimes I have positions like this, for example, and here white can choose to go d5, and you again get this structure. But in this game, I choose to play 1e4, or sorry, 1e5 against 1e4, and we got the Rue Lopez. But I choose this d6 line, and it's already kind of setting up this structure. The white pawn is still on d2, which makes it very flexible for white. But eventually, after a couple of moves, we still got the King's Indian structure. White side, white has closed the center with d5. We get this structure. So it's basically a King's Indian again. And what we will see in this game is that I try to follow Kasparov's plan or plans and try to mate white. And there are some differences with the normal King's Indian, and the biggest difference is obviously the bishop on a4, because usually it's on either e2 or d3, but now it's on a4, and it can be exchanged whenever white wants to on d7. So as I explained already, the light square bishop is really or for sure the best bishop. I'm not sure if it's really the best minor piece. And knight could also be considered quite good as the center is closed, and knights are in general quite good in close centers. So you could definitely exchange it. However, white thinks the bishop is not going anywhere, so I can take it whenever I want to. So he waited first. Here I went to h6. Black wants to go f5 in these structures, but the problem is whenever you go f5, you need to take care of knight g5 first. So here it's not really possible because knight will be jumping to d7. Maybe white could even consider taking on d7 first and then going knight g5. And you do not want to allow such a strong knight on e6. So I first went h6. And now I want to go f5 and then knight f6, castle kingside, and start the attack again. White went knight e1. Trying to get this bishop probably to this diagonal again. And also the knight will go to d3, hopping with the c5 break. So I went f5, f3 happened. I played knight f6, putting pressure on the center. So knight c3 was played. And I closed down the center again. And at this point, I wasn't entirely sure whether I wanted to play castles as soon as possible. I thought there were a lot of logical moves first to be played, which I wanted to play anyway. So I want to go knight g5 anyway in these positions. I want to go knight g6. And then I will decide whether I castle. Maybe I can leave the king on e8 and move the rook to g8 immediately. I didn't know yet. So I first played f4. Knight d3 happened, trying to go for the c5 break. I went g5. And as you can see, this is very similar to the Kasparov game, this setup. And this is a setup which you will very often get in King's Indian. So c5 happened. And here I castled, probably because I didn't want to allow knight g6, c6. In the previous game, I said that c6 wasn't a great idea because then black could play b6, but the problem here is that it's not really possible because the b7 pawn is attacked and the d7 bishop. With the bishop already on c8, let's say in this position, you could play b6, but it's not really possible here because white will take on b7 with check. So I was kind of afraid of this c6, and after bc, probably bishop takes. And now the c file is getting opened already, and my structure's kind of been ruined. The c7 pawn is backwards, so I didn't really fancy this. So I castled, and I left the knight on e7 to control the c6 square. So he played bishop d2. And I said in the previous game that white eventually wants to go g4, and he shouldn't be playing h5. And I did play h5 in this position, but it's good to know that it was a mistake. So, I did play it was a mistake.
I mean, it looks so natural, and in the absence of other moves, it's so easy to play it.
Yeah, but the thing is that there are other moves. So there are more useful moves. So there was a very nice move. I played h5 first. White went rook c1, and I played the move here. But there is a very nice move in this position for black.
Let's see if chat can guess what that move is.
Yeah, and it needs to do with white, or it's kind of a difficult move. I didn't find it myself, obviously. But it needs to do with that this bishop is better than the a4 bishop.
Okay, in terms of white or black's attack, that bishop is more valuable in the long run than the white bishop.
If we have a look at the structure, so if you have a look at the structure in the center, black pawns are on black squares and white pawns are on white squares, and that makes this bishop in general much better than this bishop. So white or the light square bishop has some attacking potential and can move along the pawns, where this bishop cannot move along the pawns because of
we already have some suggestions. Someone said g4, and
g4 is logical for sure.
Okay. But you said g4 can only be played when someone moves the knight away.
Yeah, but the difference here is that the bishop is on a4, not on e2.
Not on e2, yeah.
If you have a look, the g4 square is only attacked twice by white, and it's been protected by also twice by black. So black can play it if he wants to.
Yeah.
However, the best move in the position has been suggested, bishop c8. By a couple of players, actually.
Oh, okay. Reflector, C, and Freezy.
Yeah.
And,
so,
basically,
so
what's the logic behind this move?
Well, you just don't want to exchange the bishop off for this bishop on a4.
Okay.
And, now, actually, the bishop on a4 doesn't do anything. It looks to these squares, but there are no pieces there. There will be no pieces. Then I will go to g6 and rook to f7. So even though it looks kind of active, it actually just doesn't do anything. And black wants to keep the bishop alive as it contributes to the attack. Okay. So bishop c8 was a very powerful move in the position. And after I played h5, my opponent went rook c1. I played it on this move. Because I realized that I need to keep the bishop alive. And rook c1 was a mistake by white because he should have taken on d7. This was the last chance to take the bishop, basically.
Wow.
So this was one of the mistakes that white made in this game. So I went rook c1, I went bishop c8. And it's actually very difficult to come up with a plan for white. The pawn a6 prevent knight b5. The bishop is actually kind of blocking its own pieces. He might want to go knight a4, but it's not really possible. Eventually, white probably wants to go queen c2, which was played in the game. Take on d6, remove the knight in some way, and then go queen c7, eventually entering the position. And as I realized this, I went for the same plan that Kasparov went for. So I went knight g6, getting the knight to the attack. He went knight d1. And here I played rook f7. The same plan again. I want to get the rook eventually to the g file, but meanwhile it's protecting the c7 square.
During the game, Max, were you aware that this is the model game that you were following, the Kasparov game?
No, I actually wasn't. It's such a typical plan, and I already knew it that it kind of went automatically for me.
Okay.
I just played knight g6, rook f7, bishop e5. Sometimes you might need to consider some other plans, but this is the most typical plan of playing in King's Indian. So maybe I was considering some other ideas, but if I didn't really find anything interesting, then I would have just played these logical moves. And also, it just fell perfectly for me here. That the moment he was threatening to enter with cd6, cd6, queen c7, I had this move ready with rook f7. So it made a lot of sense for me to go knight g6 followed by rook f7. And as you can see, or if we compare this to the previous game with Piquet against Kasparov, I have the same setup as Kasparov, which is quite nice, obviously. But white's setup is much worse. The bishop is not on this diagonal. The bishop on a4 is not on e2, where it was kind of preventing the g4 break. And yeah, the knight is very passive on d1. So white just doesn't really have a plan at this point. So he played cd6, cd6, and now queen c3. He wanted to enter this way, but yeah, it just doesn't do much because when I played g4, which is not possible, after queen a5, I could just go b6, attack the queen, back. And yeah, push it back to b4. Right, it does attack d6. He's trying to enter with the bishop or the rook, but b5. And another tempo on his pieces, so he needs to move back with the bishop. And now I have another nice move, a5. So suddenly I'm not only pushing on the king side, but I'm also pushing on the queen side, which is very strange. Normally the pawns keep on b7, a7 in King's Indian, but this time it just fell perfectly that I suddenly could do this as well. If I have space on both sides, it's very difficult to play for my opponent because basically his pieces have nowhere to go, as you can see. Yeah. He could, and there's also a tactical reason why I could play a5, which is that after queen b5, I have bishop a6, and if the queen moves, I can take on d3, winning a piece. So he cannot take on b5 because after bishop a6, he will for sure lose a piece. So he went queen c3 back, and I just continued my attack. I could maybe play g3, but instead I went for another break with h4. I wanted to go for the h3 break, which would also open up his position. He went knight f2, trying to get a defender to the king side. I went for, again, the Kasparov plan with bishop f8. Trying to get the rook into the game before I open up anything on the queen side, or sorry, on the king side. He went h3, and now he's trying to kind of close down the position. So if I, for example, take an f3, he'll take back, and then he puts his knight on g4. He's trying to kind of close it down, and you'll play knight f2 afterwards, and is to get through. So instead, I played a very illogical move at first sight, g3.
This is interesting.
And yeah, it's a very interesting move because it seems to close down basically everything on the king side.
Yeah.
Because if he moves away the knight, how am I ever entering the position? It's not so clear at first.
Yeah.
The idea lies in that I can sacrifice an h3, which is a very typical idea for the king's Indian. Let's say the pawn was still in h7, and I play knight h5 and then queen h4. Then you can also consider sacrificing on h3 and trying to get the queen to h2 by giving up the bishop for the pawn. And this is one of the reasons why you would like this bishop to be alive.
Yes.
Basically, the sole reason is that it needs to be sacrificed on h3.
Yeah. I think Freeze mentioned earlier that the bishop in this light squared bishop in the king's Indian is very important, and it's quite interesting how it comes back again to just highlight the same point.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very, very important piece that you want to keep on the board. Meanwhile, you can see how poor the bishop on f8 is. Okay, it does protect d6, but it really doesn't have any future. All the pawns are on dark squares.
Yeah.
So without the bishop on c8, you would not come or go anywhere basically. Then there would be no attack. But right now it's hard to sacrifice because if you take, where's the attack? It's not there yet. So I first need to prepare this bishop takes h3. So I rerouted my knight h7 to g5, and here I then can start sacrificing on h3 because I'll take it back with the knight, and then I'll have two passed pawns which are incredibly strong because they're in front of the king. So this kind of happened. He went a4. I want to keep the position as close as possible, so I went b4, went queen c2, and then I went knight g5. And here, okay, it's hard to do anything with white really, so I went bishop c4 trying to get bishop in, but it's way too slow. And okay, here I went knight takes h3, but also bishop takes h3 would have been very strong. Both are just really just doesn't really matter.
Your problem was which piece to sacrifice.
Yeah. Actually, no. Look at it. Maybe bishop h3 made more sense because for some reason this knight feels more powerful. But both are just probably winning for black, so it doesn't matter too much. The thing with the bishop on h3 is it does attack e1. He went knight e1, which is an interesting move. Because after bishop f1, he has the light squares under control a bit. And if he gets the bishop to h3, it's very hard to continue with the attack. So here I didn't take on f1. Because again, this bishop is just... actually, it's just better than the rook. So again, I want to keep the bishop alive to keep control of the light squares, basically. He went queen d3, not knowing really what to do in the position. I went rook c7. I'm just trying to... I'm not sure why again I played these moves. I think basically to create even more pressure on the position. I can go bishop d7 whenever I want to, followed by h3 anyway. So I started with this, trying to basically prevent any counterplay from white. Because now it's very difficult to remove the bishop. And if he cannot do anything with the pieces, I can just follow my own plan, and then I do not have to worry about white's play. So he went b3, protecting the bishop. I went bishop d7 back, trying to go h3. Knight b2. Now I played h3. He went rook d1, unpinning the bishop so he can finally move it. And here, before I go either g2 or h2, I first need to improve more pieces. So I went queen h4. Trying to get the queen in, maybe go g2 eventually, followed by queen g3, and then h2 is one idea. He went queen e2. And now I had the time anyway, so I went queen h5, trying to get the it's kind of a sadistic way to win, but it was actually kind of the best way to play. So why not? I have the time anyway. White doesn't have a plan. He's up material, but he doesn't have a plan. So I can just keep on improving the pieces, and eventually I'll push the pawns.
Yeah.
You know, bishop 6. And as I said already, typical for the King's Indian, you should not care about the material. too much. Should care about it a little bit, of course, but I sacrificed the rook here as well. I went knight h4, not giving up any time. He went bishop takes e8, of course, and bishop takes e8. And at first I sacrificed the piece for 2 pawns, and then I sacrificed an exchange. So at this point I'm down a full rook. But you need to keep in account what white's pieces are worth, not the points. Basically, people get taught that the rook is worth 5 points and the bishop is worth 3 points, but sometimes they're worth less or worth more. And in this position,
I see what you mean.
Are worth less. So he went rook c1. I just took it to win a tempo, basically. And I went g2 finally. And now the problem is, okay, if I take the rook, I'm probably just winning because I'll be up a pawn out of the attack. So on the next move I could have taken it, but the problem for white was that if he went rook f2 to try and save the rook, I could have gone, I think it was h2 check.
That works.
And after king h2,
knight f3.
Knight f3, yeah. And with a double check, so it forces c2. And now queen h3 is a nice mate.
Yeah.
So I was having the threat of h2 check, so he went king f2. But I didn't care about the material. I just went queen g5. I didn't even take the rook. I'm threatening this checkmate in 2. So he went king g1 back. Now h2 check. If I play it and he takes, I do not have this check again because the queen is not on the h file. But I played the h2 check anyway because I saw it after it takes, queen g3, king g1, g takes f1 check, king f1, bishop h3 is gonna be mate. So in this position, after I under-promoted to rook, which is a nice little touch, I think my opponent resigned. So I think actually there's this, because once I saw a Facebook post, there was this famous game by Tal and King's Indian where he finished the game with an under promotion to a rook. And apparently I had already done the same as well, so it might just be just a nice little way to finish.
In general, looking at your games, do you play more like you follow people like Tao, Kasparov? Is that more the chess you enjoy?
Well, I would say that this type of game is definitely the game I would enjoy the most. But I'm not the tall kind of player. I'm not really playing very similar to tall. But if it's a King's Indian, you do not have much of a choice. You gotta go for the attack, basically.
Okay, good.
Sometimes the tall in me might come up. I don't know.
I think we can go for one last game and then go into the Simon, I think.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So I had one more game which I wanted to show, which is more from the white side. Of course, white has his own ideas as well and does not lose always as in this game or in the other game. It's actually a game which I played from the white side against the King's Indian.
Do you play e4 or d4? You just play anything you feel like?
Well, I mainly play e4, but I sometimes play d4, and these days I might even play one c4. So, but mainly a one e4 player.
Okay.
And I knew that my opponent was always playing the modern, and I thought it was interesting to go for the King's Indian, or basically this setup against it, because it kind of forces the King's Indian. And I wanted just to try this out. So I tried out this h3 bishop e3 setup. And basically the idea is kind of deep. So if black goes for use move e5, you want to go d5 as well, but you want to treat this position a bit differently. Now white is actually going for the kingside play. So usually the idea is to go f5. So let's say black goes knight d7 to go f5. The idea is to go g4 in these positions and prevent or try to prevent the f5 break in this way. Because whenever white or black goes f5 now, white can take it with the g pawn, and the g file gets opened. And because white hasn't castled yet, and black has, this is very dangerous for black. So you can take on f5, for example, and now you will develop the pieces and probably even castle queenside. And this will be very dangerous for black. So this is one of the ways you can treat the king's Indian as well. So you can go for the same side castling, both kingside, and then go for the queenside play. But you can also go for the kingside play.
Okay.
And another idea is that whenever f5 happens, you take twice, and you get this control over the e4 square. So black basically, because he cannot attack it with the d pawn, and he cannot attack it with the f pawn anymore. You have a very nice square on e4 with the knight. For example, especially after you go bishop d3 and knight e2, knight g3, you have a lot of control over the light squares. So that's another idea. So in this game, he played a6 instead. I went g4 anyway. He went c5. I developed my knight, and he could have maybe taken on d4, and then we get this type of position. But I think white has a slight edge due to space advantage. So I didn't really mind it. He went b6. I went bishop d2. Now I went e5, and again we get this close center, but a very, very different one, because white has gone g4. So usually black goes for the f5 plan, but that's not the case here, because it's just very difficult, because it will lose the control over the light squares here, because e4 will be a very nice square for the knight, and also the g file will be open, so it's very difficult to go for that break. So instead, I think black goes usually in these structures for the a6 b5 break, trying to get play in that way, but it was very difficult for black. So he went knight c7, trying to go b5. I went a4, a6, knight g3. He cannot go b5 yet because I can take on a8 and then win the pawn.
Mm-hmm.
So he needs to prepare with rook b8. And here I had this idea in mind of playing b3. And basically what I'm trying to do is stop all of his play on the queen side. So okay, he's going for b5 and he seems to have some play. After a5, a very nice move. It's very difficult for black. If b4, he has everything closed down on the queen side, so this is not the way to go, because here he will not have any play. Mm-hmm. So he needs to take, and now, as you can see, there's no way to enter with the knight. So this square is taken, this square is taken, and there's simply no way, because the knight is on a bad square on c7. Also for the bishop, there is no way to enter, as the squares are covered. And basically, I do not have this square covered, but you can never enter with a minor piece, basically. And
only the rook would be able to go to b4 and no other piece.
Yeah, so if it's only with the rook, it's very easy to defend against this play. So it was very nice to have this pawn on a5, because otherwise he might play a5 himself, get the knight in or get the bishop in. But instead, I kind of closed down the play on the queen side with this a5 move. And I just protected c4. And here, okay, he's gonna play some queen a8, rook b8. So I want to get the bishop in, protect b3. The bishop wasn't doing anything with g2 anyway. So I maneuvered the bishop, and I put the pawn on f3. And the thing in these positions is, okay, we've prevented black's play, but we need to find our own plan. And my plan in this position is to go h4, h5, and then try to open up the h file at the good moment, and maybe try to go for the attack like this, or maybe another way. Maybe try to double in this way, or try to make black in that way. It's hard to say yet. Another idea might be f4, but that needs to be timed really well because it does open up the bishop. So I went f3, trying to go h4. He went rook d8. I went h4. King f8, h5. And it's kind of clear at this point that things have gone really wrong for black. If you have a look at the minor pieces, they're already not doing anything.
I was going to ask that maneuver with queen a8 and queen a7, and still the queen is not looking good.
It's just very difficult to come up with anything really for black. Even if the rook enters on b2, where is it going? It's basically the only active piece that black has. So far this game was kind of instructive for white, I think. But I did manage to lose this game. The thing is, for the King's Indian, that it's always very solid. So even though he has no activity, it's not so easy to get through. Like, I only have the h file open, but that's it. And even though he played so passively, I need to keep the position under control, because what we'll see in the game is that I got low on time at this point because the previous moves cost me a lot of time, especially this a4 a5 plan. Cost me a lot of time to find that, and here I kind of misplayed a little bit. I didn't really know how to continue further. Probably the way to go was to play g5 here and just keep this pace. Eventually maybe putting the bishop back on c1, trying to control b2, then moving the rook to h2, then opening the g file and eventually getting in. But I took immediately, and then when g5, it releases the tension already, which is not too great, I would say. In general, you want to keep the tension if possible. So when he went g5, queen b7 happened, bishop c1, trying to control the square. You see, and he's getting his queen back eventually, and then he wants to go for the f5 or f6 break.
Yeah.
So that's his only plan, this break, anyway. So I played rook a2, trying to get the rook to the king side. Up ender with the rook. But at this point, I didn't really know what to do myself, and I was getting low on time. And then he suddenly struck with f5. So even though he has such a poor position, there's still a lot of play in the position somehow. So that's the thing with the King's Indian. It's a very fighting opening. Even in bad positions, you'll probably always have some opportunities to fight back. It's not always it's not easy to bring down, basically. Objectively, it can be bad from time to time, but it's not that easy to play against from in some positions, which makes it kind of playable. There, at some point, people were thinking if the King's Indian is refuted or not with perfect play. The thing is, you're never going to play perfectly against King's Indian because it's such a difficult opening.
Yes, especially during the reign of Kramnik, people were saying it's no longer playable. But I think that kind of applied at that particular echelon of top players, but I think just below, it's just open season.
Yeah, I mean, up until, at any level it can still be played. I think. Ding Liren was even playing it at 2780. A few years back. Rajabov is still playing it. I saw he recently drew Caruana with it. So yeah, people are still playing it sometimes, and even though it's not as popular anymore, maybe we'll see it come back. I also saw some Carlsen games online these days in this Carlsen tour.
So he's been playing everything, I think, in this tour.
Yeah, he always plays everything, but normally he never plays the King's Indian, and now he suddenly started to play the King's Indian again. So that was very interesting to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, in this position, I kind of lost my way, and Black was suddenly getting active again. And the thing is that, okay, let's have a look at this position. We can see I have a lot of space. with all of these pawns. But if you push your pawns, you might overextend a little bit.
Yeah.
So I also have a lot of weaknesses in my position. Like these squares, you're never, or they're basically not protected at all with any pawns. So it's very hard to get rid of pieces if they land there. Well, black doesn't actually have that many weaknesses in his position because his pawns haven't moved that far.
Do you think
so-
that computers still fail to evaluate these positions correctly?
I think stockfish sometimes, yeah, but the engines have gotten stronger, so it's hard to say. But sometimes they do, yeah.
Yeah, because most of the time they will over-evaluate white in these positions, and then, but you can't really find a plan of making progress.
Yeah, that was the thing. Like, if you go back to the Kasparov game, very shortly, if you have a look at this position, the engine will probably give +1 for white. The actual valuation might not even be worse at all for black, because the stockfish, like the attack is just so slow that the engines don't see it coming.
Oh, okay.
You start to read it. Well, if let's say sometimes you play the best moves for white in these positions, the evaluation will go down, even though you play the best moves for white.
Yes.
Sometimes.
Yeah, this has always been the case in the King's Indian traditionally. For those who haven't looked at that, certain positions will tell you it's 1.5 in the opening, but as you play the accurate engine moves, following it move by move, the evaluation will drop and drop and drop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, just on that particular case, what engine do you use for work?
Well, I do use stockfish, but these days there's also Lila Chess Zero. Not sure if you've heard of it.
Yeah.
It's a completely different engine, and it understands this type of position, for example, much better. It understands the close position from the French opening much better, for example. So I also use that engine to work with.
All right. For our users, you can get this engine in Fat Fritz, the new version of Fritz, and of course you can set it up. It's quite difficult to set up, but definitely worth it if you can. All right, we can continue.
Yeah. Okay, so what happened in this game as well is that it's just so hard to keep control sometimes against King's Indian. Because the thing is that you want to push, like you want to make improvements, but you also got to take care of your opponent's counterplay. So that can be difficult from time to time. So basically, for example, here, I'm pushing my pawn. I'm improving my own position, but meanwhile, I'm also giving him counterplay. So it's King's Indian can be difficult to deal with from time to time. So he took knight g4. He's getting active. This bishop is getting active. This bishop is getting active. I took on g4 and went for e5. Trying to get this square for the knight. Maybe getting some attack in. Also, I'm just trying to close down the bishop, but he went rook b3, pinning the knight. Also, kind of pinning the pawn because if it moves, he'll take my knight. So I went knight e4, trying to protect it and getting active. After bishop f5, also this knight was getting pinned, so it was already getting really difficult, especially being low on time. And rook e2, which is a good move. And he should have gone for the attack with bishop e4. I need to take back with the rook. Then queen c8, for example, and getting the queen in. And with the rooks also entering on the first or second rank, it's really hard to play this position. He said he took on c3, he sacrificed in exchange, but it wouldn't have been good if I play king f2 here, trying to escape to the center. Because what I hadn't realized was that after the also logical move king g2, he went for knight takes d5, and the attack is just devastating.
Oh, queen h4.
Yeah, so queen h4 is coming. Basically, he's removing the knight with a tempo.
Yeah. Clear in sacrifice.
Yeah, clearing sacrifice indeed. And basically after queen h4, there's just nothing to do for white. It's just lost position. Queen h1 is coming with rook f1 or
Knight g3, bishop h3.
bishop e4 is an idea. And in this position, I tried to find something, but it just wasn't there. This position is just lost. So if I tried king f2, it would have been a very unclear game still. But king g2, he sacrifices the piece, and again, black gets the king side attack in the king's Indian. I went to knight e6, and after takes queen h1, king f2, rook f1. Black is just winning here. He could maybe pick up the queen, or as he played it, queen e4, queen d5, and rook f3 checkmate.
Wow.
So I seem to have everything under control, played it perfectly, but the king's Indian is still a difficult opening.
Wow, yeah.
But yeah, if you do not have a look at the last 20 moves, this would be the ideal way to play against the king's Indian.
Yeah.
But you also need to know how to finish it off.
Yeah, these games were very instructive, and I think we learned a lot in terms of. I think this is the right approach actually to learning openings. You see classical games and the application of the principles in it, and it builds some sort of skeleton of how you can carry it out in actual play. And I think it's a starting point where then if you look at lines, you've got somewhere to put those lines on, some understanding to put the lines on.